A little while back, I was contacted and asked if I'd like to do a review of this little monitor here, this tiny little 10.5-inch monitor here. After digging into the specifications and learning a bit more about it, I jumped at the opportunity because in the vintage computing world, having a small, easily transportable screen for troubleshooting, testing, and even displaying seemed like a great fit. And on top of that, I discovered that this monitor even has an awesome secret feature, a secret vintage computing feature about it. And I'll talk about that a little later on. Let's get to it. All right, let's start off by going over the specifications of this monitor here. The Mikver 10.5 monitor here is a 10.5-inch IPS screen with a 16 by 10 screen ratio, a maximum resolution of 1920 by 1280, a 60 hertz refresh rate, and a brightness listed at 420 nits. All right, nice looking screen, very glossy. As you can see here on the back, from a port standpoint, we have an HDMI video input, video and audio input. We have the VGA input, and then a 3.5 millimeter audio jack. Then we also have the 12 volt DC power input. Now moving to the back of the monitor, right here we have two grills for the speakers, the two speakers in the monitor. They provide a decent actually a pretty good volume output. It's a little on the tinny side, but it does what it says. It provides audio. They receive their input from either this HDMI port or from the 3.5 millimeter audio jack here. I'm not an expert in screen specifications performance, but from my experience so far, it's a clear and bright screen, and it works well either through the VGA or HDMI port. Now this model also has a sheet metal enclosure, so it feels quite robust actually, pretty nice. All around it's a nice enclosure. Feels pretty tough, not like chintzy plastic, so it feels like it could actually take some abuse. You could even hook on a vase mount here on the back. Pretty kind of cool. Pretty kind of cool. Kind of pretty cool. Or kind of cool. How about that? The monitor stand, on the other hand, is a little bit of a different story. I mean, it is plastic. It works. It functions. It does what it's supposed to do. But that's about it, right? If you want to adjust the angle of the monitor, you have to almost disassemble. You have to unscrew this little tab here, or this little knob here, and then that releases the angle adjustment. Now, if you actually unscrew this enough, the whole thing will come apart. So it's multi-purpose, it works. And I think that's really what I can say the most about the monitor stand, is that it works. You might have noticed this in the first part of the video, and you might actually see it now right here as well. This little locator tab is, let's just see here. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's actually leaning or tilted, angled a little bit that direction towards the left here. And so what that does is when you slide on the screen, that fits in right here to that, is at the monitor screen. Let's back out a little bit more. And because this is so glossy, you can totally see me. You can see that the monitor will tend to want to lean that direction. Now you can actually adjust it. There's a little bit of slop in it, so you can actually adjust it a little bit, but in its natural state, it will bump a little bit downward. So that's a problem with the stand in and of itself. Again, it does the job. It's functional. It is what it is. So you could say the secret vintage or retro feature is that it can play Ultima 4. The real vintage feature that you have here with this monitor is that it accepts a 15 kilohertz signal, which means it doesn't need any upscaling when taking the video output from, say, an Atari ST or an Amiga or any other system that requires that 15 kilohertz signal. And here we have an Amiga 600 running Ultima 4 using the same monitor. And it's small enough that it actually even fits on top. Look at that. How about old school VGA? Well, as you can see here, it does not want to support my PS2 here. A little more modern VGA on this Pentium compact processor works flawlessly. I expected the PS2 just simply didn't have the resolution capability to drive the screen, or the screen doesn't support that specific resolution that the PS2 boots to. Macintosh 2SI is a no-go here. Does not support the resolution output that this computer produces. Here we have a bit more of a modern Macintosh, and it's working just fine. This is a bit of a surprise. Looking at high resolution, it does not support it. And in fact, most old VGA monitors would support, or do support, high resolution mode on an Atari ST. But in this case, this guy doesn't like it. But that said, the majority of us, at least me, I use medium and low, and they work great here. Here we have medium resolution. Looks pretty darn good of the desktop of an Atari ST. Let's take a look at what low looks like. Very clean. I don't see any jail bars on it. I mean, this computer typically has a pretty clean output, but it looks really good. Another thing that can also be done is there's plenty of settings on the back of this guy, right? We can, it's auto adjust. Great. I don't want to auto adjust anymore. Let's go here. All right, picture, aspect ratio. There we go. Let's take a look at that one. We can do full, 4:3. Full is the 16:10, 4:3 or 5:4. Enter aspect ratio, 4:3. There we go. And now we exit. All right, so this is a nice feature to have so that you can actually not have the screen as squished. I mean, the 16:10 is not that bad, honestly. As you can see, it introduces a little bit of black barring on the side. But in general, it looks pretty good. Let's look at what it looks like with medium resolution on the Atari ST. And then I'm going to bounce back to the Amiga as well. That looks excellent. Looks medium resolution always looks weird and scrunched. All right, let's go to an Amiga then. All right, just to show you clearly that this is the VGA, not some RGB to HDMI, we're just plugging into one of these lovely little RGB to VGA adapters. And we'll plug it in here, the video output. If I can get it right, there we go. Spin you around. Get this guy on top. And power it on. And here we are at the desktop. We'll zoom in a little bit here. Take a look at a few of the different kind of video settings here. We just booted in. Let's take a look at some interlace modes just to see if they work. Let's try, let's first NTC super high res. No laced. It works. Let's take a look at laced. And there is a lot of flicker in that lace. You can't see it probably here. It doesn't look like you can see it on the video recording. However, on the screen itself, it is flickering not like fun. All right, and just back to the normal. It's nice, crisp, clean screen. Works fantastic with the Atari ST on the medium and low, not on the high. It works great on the Amiga. Works well on later VGA outputs. HDMI is universally fine. And we'll take a look at a few other things. All right, let's see how PAL mode works. Since I have an NTSC Amiga here, let's take a look at PAL. Display options. Let's go PAL. PAL mode appears to have booted up just fine. Let's take a look at what resolutions we can see here. Let's see, PAL. Start with PAL 320 by 256. Very clean. That is a very clean image output. Let's look at PAL 640 by 256. That's extremely clean as well. Actually, I think it's even cleaner than some of the NTSC ones. Let's take a look at 640 by 512 interlaced. And that is a flickery mess. Actually, I think, yeah, you can even see the flickery on here on the screen now. Yeah, we don't want that. All right, back out. All right, now let's take a look at upscaling using other vintage computers. All right, an Atari 8-bit using an upscaler. Let's zoom in on the screen a little bit. This is not using S-Video. This is using the composite out upscaling because Ultima 4 doesn't have color under S-Video. However, what we're using is we're simply using a composite or S-Video to HDMI upscaler. As simple as that. But the monitor looks excellent. Looking good. Let's move on to something a little more Commodore-ish. And here we are on the Commodore 64. I picked the 64C because actually I tried the bread bin to begin with, but the monitor wouldn't fit on top of it without pressing keys. So it fits nicely on the little ledge on the 64C. Again, image looks great. I mean, the upscaler does its job. Anything with HDMI, the upscaler should work with if it works on it anyway. So this is just showing you what it would look like. So why is a small little monitor like this useful? Or useful for me, right? Because to be frank, I like big monitors. I like to use big monitors for playing games, for doing work, just so that I have more space, right? And a bigger view. However, there are some very, very good reasons to have a small monitor on hand. There are really three the way I look at it, for me at least. And the first one is when troubleshooting computers, lugging around a monitor back and forth, moving the monitor so I can have space on my tabletop so that I can then work on the computer. Then I have to clear off the tabletop to put a monitor back on or squeeze it on somewhere somehow in order to then test the computer again. Having a tiny monitor like this is excellent. It makes it very simple to just move around wherever I need it, and it fits in a tiny, tight space. It does what I need. So for troubleshooting, let's say Atari STs or Amigas, this is just awesome, fantastic. Now, there are other ways I could do that. I could have monitors mounted to the wall. I could have them high. I could have them all over the place in different ways. But this is a nice, simple way. I'm not looking for super high quality video output. I'm looking for, does it give the picture? And then does it make the sounds that I needed to make? Testing out those two elements specifically. All right, the second reason is I've been beta testing, this STE 536, putting on little mods here and there on this guy, but especially doing a lot of firmware testing. And that requires reprogramming this CPLD. I used this Raspberry Pi here multiple times, literally just last week, to test out different firmwares for the CPLD, this Xilinx chip here, right? And this made it extremely easy. I didn't have to move things around, shuffle, because the way I program it is I leave the accelerator plugged into the board, the Atari ST in particular, and then use these JTAG header pins here and connect them up to a number of pins on the GPIO pins on the Raspberry Pi, and then reflash new ROM, or not new ROMs, new firmwares onto it. And just having this monitor here so that I could actually execute it. Again, I didn't need anything any pretty picture. I simply needed to have a display so that I could see what was going on in the Raspberry Pi, so I could then reflash the firmware. Now, the last reason why this seems to make a lot of sense to me is I do enjoy going to the various different vintage festivals. VCF Midwest is an absolute blast. Displaying there is fantastic. There is the Indie Classic that's coming up in Indianapolis, which is actually almost like a mini VCF Midwest as well. It's last year was actually pretty huge. Very cool places. And taking a lot of large monitors becomes space constraining, right? I can only take so many monitors. I can only fit so many of those large monitors on a table, meaning that I can only show 3, 4, maybe computers at most working. These small monitors help out tremendously. Not only are they easy to travel with, they're easy to set up. They can sit on top of the computers themselves without worrying about any damage to the computers. And they're not fragile. Oh, this one isn't pretty fragile. This one's actually pretty robust, right? And so comparing it to, say, a CRT, CRTs are wonderful, and having a CRT or two is actually a good thing to have. However, just if you just want to show that the computer's working and how it functions, these monitors, I don't think you can really beat this. This is a fantastic way to go. All right, so this is the first time I've done kind of a product review that's been sponsored, where the seller sent this to me, right? And if I didn't think that this was actually useful for those 3 reasons I mentioned earlier, I don't think I would have ever done this video. I wouldn't even agree to it, but it really intrigued me. Now, the one thing I didn't know about at the time was the 15 kilohertz capability of this. And that just makes this a huge win in my book. Now, just because it fits me doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea for you, but I'd say, hey, for the vintage community, for all the features it has, the size, the build quality, at least of the monitor itself, and again, the 15 kilohertz compatibility, this is a clear win for me. Now, a link to the an Amazon linking, a link to the Amazon listing of this monitor, as well as a coupon code, will be in the description below. So the seller wanted to give me a coupon code for anyone who wanted to purchase one of these as well. So if it's something you like, you get some money off too at the same time. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and have a fantastic day. Bye.